Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia, and today we've got a Superflex mock draft with my super friends. I am so lucky today because we have the production team joining us from the Darren Waller music video, director Pat Fitzmaurice, production designer Andrew Erickson, and we also have the man running craft services, Derek Brown, on that project. Gentlemen, the best of Fantasy Pros, my super friends for a Superflex mocks, and joining us as well, people from our Discord, our wonderful folks over there hanging out on Discord, talking football all day long, and our mock draft channel doing a million mocks already, and it's only June, so welcome everybody. Pat, when Darren Waller brought that project to you, how excited were you to be involved?
Yeah, I'm so flattered that I was chosen as the producer when the true Darren Waller stans are with me here, Derek Brown and Andrew Erickson. Those are the guys who were all in.
Dude, he was good before he got hurt. He was good before he got hurt.
Speaking of knives in the back. Oh,
well, here's the thing, Pat. I gave you the title of director, but we all know who the producers were. It's those other two guys right there. They had to recoup their money from last year. I can't wait. When does the album drop, Erickson? When's the full album drop?
A couple days after the wedding.
A couple days after a wedding? Okay, that's good. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of... I'm sure you're not going to lose any money on that. Derek Brown, I don't know about you, but that song's been in my head all weekend since you guys shared it with me the other day, and I just can't get away from it.
The production value alone is just glorious.
It is.
I mean, I feel good for Darren Waller because I feel like he's got the same representation as that Le'Veon Bell had when he jumped out as a musical artist. Like, lots of people in his ears telling him these are really good choices. And
when you guys come over my house in the summertime for Flex Draft, I say we go to the beach and we recreate it. I think it's going to be a beautiful time. That's what I say right now. We're gonna get the whole production team on it. But right now they're busy doing the Superflex mock draft. We have it PPR style, Superflex. One extra flex position here, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Joining us here on the draft today, it's me at the one spot. Our friend MB, Embarrassed, actually made it into this one. One of the great characters of our Discord. Love MB. Raptors is in there. I've played in leagues with Raptors. That's the thing. You join our Discord, you get to know everybody. Next thing you know, you're in leagues with people that you don't even know. They're just super fun and great at football. You have Erickson and Debro back-to-back at 4 and 5. Juggernaut at 6. Joey P's OnlyFans is back at 107, which, again, if this doesn't work out, I don't win this draft today. My hard pivot will probably be to the OnlyFans full-time. Also in this draft today, we've got Chris, we've got Spectre, Pat Fitzmaurice at 10, Tube Socks at 11, and Alonzo at 12. So, Pat, I know we have an upcoming show on, different strategies for different drafts. What is your strategy heading into 2024 for Superflex drafts? Because it feels like the quarterback position is in a better place than it was last year with so many rookies and so much uncertainty.
It is, and I generally try to attack it in the first 2 rounds with at least get one of those quarterback spots filled. And I don't feel obligated to start quarterback. In fact, I often don't like to do that just because I feel like it robs me of the chance to get a superstar at a different position.
Very well. All right. Debro, Erickson, we are just 1 second away from starting. Now, I'm going to give it a shot here to stick with my theory, which is the quarterbacks are a little bit better than they've been compared to last year, a little bit higher of a floor, guys you can live with. So I'm going to start with the 1-1 anyway, again, with CeeDee Lamb, and see again how this quarterback run happens, when it happens, and how disciplined guys like Erickson and Debro are when it comes to quarterbacks. Erickson, are you one of these guys that must take a quarterback in round 1, or do you have to take the elite Chase, Justin Jefferson, who just got paid, one of those guys instead early on, and then look for quarterback afterwards?
I think it depends on where you're picking. So I picked the 4 spot here because I know that I wanted to get one of the elite quarterbacks. So if I'm picking in the first half of the first round, I do like going after one of the elite quarterbacks. I think that could be a true difference maker at the position. But if I'm picking in the second half of round 1, then especially in a PPR where you have the top skill positions, it's easier for them to close the gap in terms of like how many points they can score versus the quarterbacks. It's way different in half PPR because those players just score less points. So I think in the second half of round 1, that's where I'd be more open to a, Jamar Chase or a Bijan or Breece Hall, one of these top skill players.
All right, you are on the clock right now. I started Lamb at 101, then Josh Allen at 102, Jalen Hurts at 103. D-Bro, I've got a lot of concerns there about the touchdown regression for Hurts and Allen. I want to talk to you about that in a second. But first, let's talk about your selection, because Lamar Jackson, the third quarterback off the board for Erickson. No respect for Patrick Mahomes. None. I have had it. I have absolutely had it with the disrespect to Patrick Mahomes. Derek Brown, you continue to disrespect him. He is not the 105 pick. Instead, you took Chase, which, again, I love. So let's talk about Chase, and let's talk about the possible touchdown regression with Kelsey being gone and no more brotherly shove there, plus the addition of Saquon and Philly. And then Josh Allen in a situation here where, he doubled up his rushing total of touchdowns year over year. That's a huge leap. So that feels like it's unsustainable as well. Talk to me about those two guys and about Chase.
I mean, looking at all these quarterbacks going off the board, look, my players to avoid article just went live on FantasyPros.com, so I am off the Josh Allen train, and I get Superflex is a very different conversation. Lots of worries as far as his profile and what it looks like for this year. Could be having a 2023-esque Patrick Mahomes season. We shall see. But looking at the other guys that went here, man, I mean, I don't have a lot of qualms. I'm not that worried about Jalen Hurts. He's still going to get his. I think the pace of the offense, they're going to score a lot more points. It's going to be a better offense this year with Kellen Moore at the controls, because Brian Johnson had no clue what he was doing last year. I went chasing this because looking at where I'm at in this draft, I do feel pretty good that I can get a quarterback probably round 2 that I can anchor, but at least that room. And I'm more likely to double tap quarterbacks in dynasty formats and Superflex than I am in redraft, just because we see injuries, we see parity, and
Sure.
I can kind of mix and match the QB2 positions specifically over the course of a season versus something like a format like Dynasty.
Were there injuries at the quarterback position last year? I don't remember that.
Just a few. Just a few, Joey.
A few. So yeah. Chase at 105, Patrick Mahomes finally at 106. I'm kidding. I'm exaggerating just a little bit. This is a little shocking, though, to me. Joey P's OnlyFans at 107 selects CJ Stroud, which I think that's where I would pivot. McCaffrey would have been my selection there. Anthony Richardson goes at 108. McCaffrey goes at 109. Pat, McCaffrey almost made it to you at 110. How much of an excitement would that be? Now, you ended up taking Tyreek Hill, which, again, can't argue with that. But can you believe that there you go? CMC almost made it to 110 in the Superflex?
Oh, I was ready for it, Joe. I mean, he was ready. Yeah, snatched away from me by Spectre. So not happy with Spectre right now. I'm going to shun him on Discord for that. I was excited. I mean, I know Erickson has some concerns about anyone who would want to take McCaffrey 101, but the combination of talent, volume, play calling, and supporting cast, it's all there. As much as I understand, we don't see top scores at running back repeat often year to year. But who has the better outlook for 2024? I don't think there is another running back with a better outlook than CMC.
I think what's driving home for me, Pat, is, if you have a selection process where you can choose where you want to be in Superflex this year in your draft, I want to be towards the end. I want to be 10, 11, 12, because look at this talent that's on the board here. Tyreek Hill to you, Justin Jefferson at 111, Joe Burrow at the turn along with Breece Hall. I mean, that's a great way to start teams. Erickson, what do you think about that too? If you have your druthers of where you want to select in Superflex this year, it feels like the turn or those last 3 picks is really where you could get some tremendous value. There's still elite top 10 quarterback play out there. There's elite level wide receivers out there because of obviously the quarterbacks going earlier typically in the suppression. Do you agree or disagree? Would you still rather be at the top and get that premium QB or wide receiver?
I still like being at the top because I think that, especially in Superflex, where, if you can get 2 elite quarterbacks, you're talking about some people valuing some of these skill position players, because it depends on your draft. Because sometimes you see quarterbacks get overdrafted, essentially in Superflex, where you're seeing almost that next tier go in the first round. And then you see ones where a little bit more like our draft right now, we are a little bit more open to taking some of these skill players. So for me, Superflex, you can't punt quarterback too far, because then you're screwed.
No.
And that's the thing that I always try to harp on people when they ask me about Superflex strategy. Be like, look, you can't play quarterback chicken. I'm sorry. It's just not worth the risk, because if you get boxed out and you get stuck with bad quarterbacks, everyone's going to look at your team and be like, okay, that's the team that can't compete. So I always just kind of want to play a little bit safer and take a top 7 pick so I can lock in one of these elite passers.
Yeah, there was zero chill last year in the Flex League, Super Flex League draft that we did in August because, quarterbacks went flying off boards. And I think it's because people were just afraid of the depth issue. I think the depth is a little better this year. The rookies coming in a little bit more capable of being good right away. So I am one to wait. And the 2 times that I've won that expert league, both times I went and I took a position player first. It was an elite wide receiver, and that's worked out. But again, you don't want to necessarily play chicken. That was a really good way of putting it. Breece Hall at 201, at 202, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray at 203. Pat, great value here. You're getting a rushing QB here, starting off your squad with Jamar Chase and Kyler Murray. How do you feel about this start, and how do you feel about Murray in 24?
Well, thank you, Joe. Yeah, pretty good, because now he's got weapons with Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride. He's not totally bereft of talent around him. And yes, he does offer that rushing upside. So I think he was a pretty good get in the early second.
Okay, after that happens, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown. What a value at 204. You have Chris selecting Jordan Love at 205. Joey P's OnlyFans takes Bijan Robinson every time they pick. I'm going to say this because clearly Joey P's OnlyFans, the best name ever for a draft. 207, Brock Purdy. So here you go. That second tier of QBs starts to fly off the board. And speaking of that, the aggression of Derek Brown, Jaden Daniels, 208. Talk to me.
Again, this is why you can wait at least a round on quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels is my QB 10. He's a locked-in QB 1 this year with a ton of upside, and the fact that I can get a rushing quarterback at this point in the draft and start with my wide receiver 1 of the season, Jamar Chase, let's go, baby.
Works for me. All right, so after you took Jaden Daniels, A.J. Brown to Andrew Erickson at 209, tremendous value for A.J. Brown. I know some problems last year in the second half, but the Eagles were a problem in the second half. I think you would agree, Andrew Erickson. So how do you look to 2024 and hope for more consistency out of A.J. Brown?
I mean, I'm just hoping that we get A.J. Brown for the first 10 weeks when it was basically him and Tyreek Hill that were going for fantasy wide receiver 1 status. I mean, we're talking about A.J. Brown as offensive player of the year, alongside Tyreek Hill. So again, things kind of fell apart. Like you said, he was banged up. He didn't even play in the last game the Eagles played, and we saw them in the playoffs, and it was a disaster. So I'm just hoping that we're going to get more consistent production from A.J. Brown. He's a proven producer. He's done it year in, year out, even when he's been competing with guys like Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. So I think A.J. Brown should definitely still be a wide receiver 1 this year, and I like starting my team with him as my wide receiver 1.
Puka Nacua, the juice is loose at 210, and then 211, Garrett Wilson. I was hoping maybe Wilson will make it back to me. He did not. MB took him off the board there. So I double-tapped quarterback. CeeDee Lamb starting there, nice and boring. And then, speaking of boring, I've got 2 guys that I'm going to go and have some, nice turkey sandwiches with maybe just a little bit of mayo if we're being excited. Maybe the 3 of us, me, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, have a little picnic lunch, go to Kohl's, pick out some new sandals for the summertime, and then go play some Superflex. I love the schedule for Jared Goff this year. Andrew Erickson had the tweet of the year about it, talking about how many dome games he's going to have this year and how well he plays there compared to outside. And, of course, Kirk Cousins, who every year is a QB1 and nobody wants him. I want him. I think he's got a lot to prove, a little chip on his shoulder where Kirk Cousins is saying, gosh, gee whiz, gee willikers. I can't believe nobody respects me, gosh darn it. Well, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to prove you fellers wrong. It's almost like Butters from South Park was grown up. That's how I think of Kirk Cousins. I love Butters.
Doesn't Butters die in every episode?
No, that's Kenny, you
idiot.
That's
Kenny.
Oh my
God.
Just say you never watched South Park.
I've watched it before.
Just say you've never watched it. Just go ahead and say it.
I've watched
Tell me
the
you don't
Guitar
watch
Hero
South Park
episode
without telling me you don't watch South Park.
Exactly.
Stop it. I wish I could. If I could kick you off the show, I would, but we've got more draft. We're only the 3rd round. Tua Tagovailoa goes at 302. Herbert goes at 303. So officially now, quarterbacks are getting real scarce. So I'm very glad that I double tapped when I did. I've got 2 guys to me who are in the top 15 conversation. That's good enough. I've got an elite wide receiver. Herbert at 303. Jahmyr Gibbs to Andrew Erickson next. Let's talk about Gibbs, another guy who went really ballistic in the second half. People were losing their mind in the first half, but that patience was paid off. So what does year 2 now of this backfield look like with Gibbs and Montgomery, in your opinion, Andrew?
Well, I think we could see a larger role for Gibbs. I mean, we see this a lot of time with second-year running backs. When I was doing my Dynasty deep dive on players to target second-year running backs was like the number one thing. When you look at guys year over year, that's the guy who see the biggest shoot in value and increase. So Jahmyr Gibbs plays in a great offense, and we expect to score a ton of points. It's full PPR. We know he's going to be involved in the passing game. Jared Goff is not a mobile quarterback, so who's going to be his check down option? If Amon-Ra or Sam Laporta's not open, it's going to be Jahmyr Gibbs. So again, if the touchdowns flip a little bit, they use him a little bit more in the red zone, which they did down the second half of the year. He and David Montgomery were kind of splitting in the red zone, so it's not just David Montgomery vulturing all the touchdowns. I think just Jahmyr Gibbs, he was a top 15 pick overall in the first round. Like, this guy's super talented, plays on a great offense, in a dome, catches passes.
Oh, I love it.
So, yeah.
I love it, and I love that you took him over some other guys who were still on the board, too. I like it. Derek Brown's going to have problems in his clubhouse because he selected Caleb Williams second after Jaden Daniels in round 2. So you got your quarterbacks. How do you feel about having 2 rookies, though, going into Superflex? Does that bother you at all? I understand both of these rookies have very high ceilings, potentially, especially in fantasy and the rushing equity of Daniels. I get why you took Daniels ahead of Williams. I would have done the same thing. But do you worry at all about stability, Derek Brown?
I do, and I feel like this is just swinging for upside. I do want to admit the pain that I feel in my loins by the fact that you took Jared Goff. That's the player that I really wanted. So you look at it as a boring pick, Joey. I really wanted Jared Goff. So, but going with Caleb Williams.
Well, look at the QB board right now. It's like Rodgers and Watson, and like it gets ugly. It gets dark out. It gets dark out in Superflex.
It gets rough out there really fast. So yeah, I went shooting for upside with 2 rookies right now.
All right, let's continue on here with the draft. After you took Caleb Williams, Jonathan Taylor goes, then Marvin Harrison Jr. to Joey P's OnlyFans, Devontae Adams at 308, JJ McCarthy. Is Spectre drafting for Thor? I can't quite make that out. I can't see. After that selection here, again, that's a little early. Trevor Lawrence goes to Pat Fitzmaurice at 310, Saquon Barkley at 311, then Pittman at 312, Chris Olave starts round 4, Matt Stafford, and then Sam Laporta. So Laporta and Lawrence, let's talk about your 2 picks and how you feel about them, Pat.
Yeah, echoing your, was it a Yogi Berra-ism? Did you bust out, it gets late early here? I mean, that is how it feels at quarterback. So I was grabbing Trevor Lawrence before things got much uglier at the position. So pretty satisfied with that. Then there weren't options that I loved with that Laporta pick. I was just going to try something a little bit different and get the, the guy who's my top tight end and, try that and see how it works out because I didn't love any of the other options there.
Understandable. All right, so let's go back through this round here. After you selected Laporta at 403, Baker Mayfield at 404, who I think is a really nice, safe QB2 this year. I really do. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I feel safe and protected by Baker Mayfield. 405, Brandon Ayuk, then Drake London to Joey P's OnlyFans. Travis Etienne at 407. Nico Collins, that's the guy I wanted, Derek, so touche. You stabbed me right back. So let's talk about Nico, who is, look, this is not for debate, right, Derek? He's the number 1 guy in Houston, yes?
Yes, I agree that he's the number 1 guy in Houston. And again, taking upside bets here. If Stroud takes another leap in his second year and now he's surrounded by just even more weapons and hopefully a fully healthy offensive line the entire year, I mean, Nico just crushed every single rate and efficiency metric you'd want last year. So I'm just going to buy right back in.
Love it. I'm all in. I'm also all in on Andrew Erickson's selection here of Jalen Waddle at 409. We're going to talk about that right now because Waddle, Andrew, I think might be the most disrespected, underappreciated wide receiver right now in fantasy. He just got paid. Follow the money. If you follow the money, that's where the ball's going. Last year was a disappointing year because he was hurt. The year before, 1,300 yards. The year before that as a rookie, over 1,000. So let's talk about Jalen Waddle and what a value he is here at 4.9.
Yeah, I mean, he's a proven producer that got hurt last year, and that's why he's going where he's going because he wasn't healthy, and he had a down year, didn't score a lot of touchdowns, but we know this Miami Dolphins offense, especially early in the season, is going to cook in South Beach, so I'm excited for that. And I mean, like I talked about him being a proven producer. He's also done it in multiple ways. Like his rookie year, he was like a receptions monster. The second year, he was more efficiency alongside Tyreek Hill. So expect the efficiency to still be there with the head coach in place. So yeah, I love Jalen Waddle, like buying the dip on him after a down year.
All right. After that selection, looking to the draft board, Jalen Wall, Kyron Williams at 410, 411, Mike Evans, and I took Travis Kelce at 412. Again, the disrespect. He was hurt last year. He's still the best target that Patrick Mahomes has. He's got 2 years left in the tank. Let's go. And then I took Rachaad White, 501. I really think there's value here. Safe. Give me a running back that I can count on, that I know is a part of the offense. I don't see competition for him there. Isaiah Pacheco at 502. DJ Moore at 5.3. Then back to you, Erickson, for Cooper at 504.
Yep. I just think that Amari Cooper is a really solid upside play. We saw what he did against the Houston Texans in the playoffs last year. That's the ride you sign up for. It's not pretty, but every year it's like over 1,000 yards, 7, 6, 8 touchdowns, and he's productive. And he's going to be 30 this year, too. So we're 94 babies. So I love him.
Just like you. Oh, you guys are adorable. All right. DK Metcalf at 505. Derek Brown. I think we'd all like to see a bounce back year from Geno Smith. Do you think that's in the cards here for him and for DK Metcalf along together?
I do. I think we're going to see a better offensive line. I mean, poor Geno had to face he faced the 5th highest pressure rate last year. If that goes down, I've talked about this on numerous episodes. All of Geno's numbers from a clean pocket were fantastic last year. So if he gets more clean pockets, we're going to see better production out of Geno Smith this year.
Dirty Pockets, one of the shows on Joey P's OnlyFans, by the way. So there you go. 506, Deebo Samuel. Then Stephon Diggs at 507. Josh Jacobs at 508. Devon Achane at a 509. And then Pat Fitzmaurice, Devonta Smith at 510. Then you have Derrick Henry going at 511. Aaron Rodgers at the turn, along with Cooper Kupp. I was hoping Kupp would slide further. He did not. Trey McBride at 602. And then, Pat, you went running back with Walker. Let's talk about Walker. Let's talk about Smith. Break those two guys down for me.
Well, I'm really being haunted by Spectre in this draft because every time I've got a running back I want teed up, in this case, Devon Achane, Spectre grabs him right in front of me. So I had to settle for the guy I thought was the best wide receiver still on the board, Devonta Smith, who, I feel like even with A.J. Brown around there as a true sort of alpha receiver, Smith is just so good. He is going to get his, and he's going to have some big games, and that's kind of what we saw from him last year. And then coming back, did want to get a foot in the door at running back, and I feel like Kenneth Walker is sort of being undervalued this year. I'm not really sure why. He's broken more tackles than any running back in the league the last 2 years. Zach Charbonnet, maybe some people see him as a threat, but Charbonnet averaged 7.4 touches a game in games that Kenneth Walker played. Walker got more than twice as many carries or twice as many touches. So I think Walker's a pretty good value at this point in the draft.
I would agree with that. Especially both those guys, I think, are good values where you've gotten them. Mark Andrews at 604 to Spectre, then Keenan Allen 605, Geno at 606, Zay Flowers to Juggernaut, Dalton Kincaid to Derek Brown. D-Bro, you keep telling me that Dalton Kincaid could lead this team in targets. If he does, it's a big win at 608.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm just building out a zero RB team. I got both my quarterbacks stashed in. And the other thing about the quarterbacks that I want to mention here, too, look at bye weeks. If you're only going to go maybe 2 quarterbacks in these early rounds and maybe you don't get a really good third one, make sure you stagger those bye weeks if possible. If not, that's fine, but it's something I'm keeping in mind here in these early rounds. So, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling very good about my wide receiver room, loving how this draft is playing out so far. I do think I am going to finally uncork a running back here. Let's go Joe Mixon, baby.
Can I guess who? Oh, it's not who I thought it was going to be. All right, we'll save that. That's a tease. We'll save it for those people just listening who you ended up selecting. Malik Neighbors goes at 609. Erickson, you passed on some more proven wide receivers to go with the rookie. I understand he is the only show in town, but that show also stars Daniel Jones. Any concerns about Malik Neighbors?
I mean, full PPR, he's going to get as much as he can handle. So that's what I'm hoping for. Look, I don't know who's playing the slot for the Giants because it feels like they're talking about every single player they have on their roster. Like, they're going to put Wandale on the slot, Jalen Hyatt's going to go in the slot, Malik Neighbors is going to play in the slot. Guys, how many guys can we fit in the slot? Like, we can't do 3 guys in a row.
Also a show on Joey P's OnlyFans.
So,
by the way,
I'm hoping that they prioritize Malik Neighbors as the guy they want to get the ball to. So, Darren Waller's obviously gone. So, they need a new number 1. That's Malik Neighbors. So I think that what he can do after the catch as Daniel Jones' outlet, that's what I'm excited for. And I'm going to bet on as a first round pick.
All right. There you have it, everybody. All right. Let's continue on here. After Malik Neighbors, Alvin Kamara goes at 6'10". James Cook at 6'11". Then I doubled up on wide receivers. T. Higgins is my number 2. Terry McLaurin is my number 3. I'm looking at Higgins to have a bounce back year here with a healthy Joe Burrow because, well, so far he's still a Bengal last time I checked. And then Terry McLaurin, another guy too, great talent. I mean, finally he's getting to play with a quarterback that I think could really unlock him. So I'm excited about McLaurin this year. Excited about him as my third wide receiver too, especially since I already have Kelsey. So that's like having, another wide receiver basically. So I'm loving this team right now. And I got my two boring old quarterbacks too. Let's go. Christian Kirk goes right after at 702, who I almost took over McLaurin, but instead I decided to have a little fun with TMC. Tank Dell at 703, back to Erickson for Pickens at 704.
Yeah, just bet on the upside of a breakout player and entering year 3 and hoping that the Steelers don't trade for Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk. That's what my fingers crossed. So again, his ranking could look very different if one of those guys ends up getting moved to the Steelers. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But for now, I think that he's just a player I want to bet on a potential breakout going in the middle rounds.
All right. Continuing next is Joe Mixon. That's the running back Derek Brown took. D-Bro, I thought it was going to be Zamir White. I understand why it was Mixon, but you're the guy who keeps telling me about how inefficient he was last year. So why was it Mixon at the end of the day? Just because he's in the better offense?
Better offense, better offensive line. I don't think people are giving the Houston offensive line enough credit. When Devin Singletary was the starter, this was a top 12 run blocking offensive line. And I've given Joe Mixon a lot of hate over the last 2 years. I'm in this year, man. He's going to get a ton of volume. This offense is going to fly this year. So, yes, can I get to maybe the best parts of the Houston offense outside of C.J. Stroud and Mixon and Nico Collins? You better believe I'm doing it.
All right. Continuing on with the draft here, we'll pause for a quick second, get a recap because we're flying here. After Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, then Kyle Pitts at 707. I am very high on Pitts this year. Ramondre Stevenson at 708. I'm not very high on him this year. Jaden Reed at 709. Pat Fitzmaurice, Calvin Ridley at 710. Then Chris Godwin at 11. David Montgomery at the turn along with DeAndre Swift. So double tapping RBs as Lonzo in the bottom of this draft. Kicking off 801 is Swift, then Deontay Johnson. Hollywood Brown. So Calvin Ridley, Hollywood Brown. Two veteran guys here, Pat. You're building out your wide receiver room with Hill, Devonta Smith, Ridley, Hollywood Brown. That's a spicy meatball in a PPR. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the thing, Joe. Like, I didn't love the options available here. Like, with that first selection at wide receiver with Ridley, we're about 80 picks into the draft. I feel like we kind of hit a drop-off in the quality of players available. So just going for the strategy of sort of rounding out the receiver room and making sure I have enough firepower there, since you can start 3, can really start as many as 4 if you plug one into your normal flex spot. So just make sure I'm well stocked there. Ridley, maybe we didn't get the season we were hoping for from him last year, and maybe Will Levis isn't capable of getting him to the promised land this year, but I do believe in the talent. And Hollywood Brown, I have not traditionally been a big Hollywood Brown fan, but I love the outlook with him, with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City and Andy Reid devising ways to use all that speed.
Makes sense to me. All right, let's move on here from those picks. And Pat, and then we've got Jordan Addison, 804, James Conner, 805, Zamir White lasting all the way to 806, then Rashee Rice, Derek Brown, your third quarterback, Will Levis. Why did you go quarterback here? Talk to me about the strategy.
I mean, it's really just falling off a cliff. I've already embraced the risk of these quarterbacks, so I'm just going to double down on the risk. Look, if anybody's listened to this show before, I've not been a big Will Levis fan, but if you're looking at how this Tennessee offense can be composed, and if I'm wrong on Will Levis, and I'm willing to make the bet that, look, maybe I'm wrong on him, I do believe they are going to have a very high pass rate this year. So if Will Levis does work out and these weapons do hit, I'll be glad I have him as a third quarterback. And again, alternating bye weeks. And now I'm just done at quarterback. I'm done. I'm locked out. Now I can just go hammer running backs, wide receivers for the rest of this draft.
There you go. We'll see how that works out for you and for Will Levis. Evan Ingram goes next to Andrew Erickson at 809. Erickson, certainly a good value on the tight end board here. Do you feel like you got the last guy that you really feel excited about at the tight end position, coming off a good year too?
Well, yeah, I like him specifically in the PPR format. I believe he caught like over 100 balls last year. So like he's just racking up receptions. So I think that he's very different from the next tight end where you look at it's George Kittle. George Kittle is much more boom or bust, where that's probably better in like a half point setting where it's really more reliant on touchdowns. Whereas Evan Ingram did not score a lot of touchdowns that last year, but he was still really productive in PPR because he was Trevor Lawrence's main guy, especially after Christian Kirk went down. So that's kind of why I'm playing it. I mean, in hindsight, I should have taken Mark Andrews much earlier to stack him with Lamar Jackson, but it's why we mock. You live and learn, and that's where I'm at.
Hey, don't worry. Likely will be on the waiver wire when Andrews gets hurt in week 3. So don't worry. It'll all be fine. Now, this draft continues to go on, but the NFL draft is over and the teams are set. It's time to start looking ahead to the NFL season with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Get a jump start in the season with futures bets, division winners, win totals, stat leaders, and so much more. Join me, Pat Fitzmaurice, and Andrew Erickson over on the Betting Pros YouTube channel for all of those breakdowns because we're going to have so much NFL content for you this summer to lead into those futures bets. And in the meantime, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Use that promo code FantasyPros, and new customers bet $5, get $200 in bonus bets. What? Instantly? My God. That's promo code FantasyPros only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's crown some more players for my team because that's why I'm here. After DeAndre Hopkins at 8'10", Tony Pollard at 8'11", Jackson Smith and Jigma to be at 8'12", I think it's time. I think the worm is turning here. JSN second year starts to emerge as the guy, and Tyler Lockett starts to fade into the background. I think we can get there. And if not, I've doubled down here with another young player, Xavier Worthy. He fast. In 901, I think this is a guy that really is going to stretch the field. I'm going to be patient here, though, with Xavier Worthy. And I can be because he's basically my wide receiver, 5. So if he emerges in the second half as one of these big touchdown, big play guys, that's a guy that I feel really good when I get to bye weeks starting in that flex spot. Jaylen Warren goes next. I couldn't decide between Warren and Williams and all these other running backs, so I just passed on all of them, and now they're all going in a row. So now I have buyer's remorse. Deshaun Watson at 804. Andrew Erickson. Does this come with like a whole, thing of painkillers for you, like to take Deshaun Watson? Because I feel like this is a tough one. Deshaun Watson, I understand the upside, but the further and further we get removed from the best version of him, it seems like we're never going to see the superstar version of Watson again. What do you think about him in 2024? Because you have selected him as your second quarterback, not your third.
I mean, he's going to start the games. I mean, that matters at this point in the draft. I need a starter in Superflex. So Deshaun Watson, unless he, again, vomits all over himself or gets hurt, I'm pretty sure he's going to be starting. I know they brought in Jameis Winston, but look, Deshaun Watson, again, off the field issues aside, it's like the guy's a running quarterback. And we put a premium on that in fantasy football. And I know people don't want to draft him because, he's an awful human. Like people don't want to draft him. I get that. That's why he falls. He fell way past ECR and ADP because nobody wants to draft him. And I get that. I don't really want him on my team, but I'm looking at it from a fantasy perspective. And he's a mobile quarterback with decent weapons. I already have Amari Cooper. So I'm already invested in this Browns offense a little bit. So that's kind of why I made the pick.
The nice thing about the mock draft software too, and we're doing this obviously on Fantasy Pros, Draft Wizard. If you haven't done a draft year ever, I encourage you to go check it out. It's fantastic. But the Draft Wizard allows you to undo picks. And after seeing the run that's happened on running backs, I'd like to undo my picks and continue on again and maybe select one of the running backs because it went fast and furious. Because after Watson, Debro, I should have known better that you were going to take Brian Robinson Jr. Talk to me about Robinson Jr. and then we'll talk about the rest of this run of RBs because it is not good. It is no bueno for me right now in the RB department. But let's talk about Robinson because this is a dude that you keep saying is possibly set up for a really strong season in 04.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this in the Bold Takes episode. I just think this rushing offense is going to be fantastic. I think Jaden Daniels is going to unlock everything. I think the offensive line is going to play better than people are giving it credit for, considering the additions they made in the offseason. So people could say, well, why are you drafting Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson? I think a lot of the touchdown equity of this offense is going to be fed through the ground game. So I don't care about taking a rushing quarterback and his running back. Haven't we seen plenty of offenses? If the offense is good, and that's the bet I'm making, haven't we seen a lot of rushing quarterbacks as well as their starting running backs also produce?
Yeah, no, it's a very easy argument there, that's for sure. All right, let's continue on after you selected Brian Robinson. Najee Harris, Tajay Spears, Austin Eckler. Worthy of note, it's a PPR, but Robinson still went ahead of Eckler, so take of that what you will. Rome Odunze, then Christian Watson to Pat Fitzmaurice. The cheesehead gets a cheesehead. Lad McConkey goes at 5'11". That's probably who I think I might have rather selected in the PPR than Worthy looking at the board right now. Again, that undue pick, you can keep practicing all of your draft strategies and go, this is really the value of this round. It's incredible what Draft Wizard gives you. Again, download Draft Wizard app, go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard and start mocking today. Tyler Lockett goes at the turn along with Cortland Sutton, then Jamison Williams at 10:02, Raheem Mostert at 10:03. Watson, enormous upside, Pat. Mostert, enormous downside. He's 32, huge touchdown efficiency last year, has other competition. So let's talk about both of these selections here between Watson and Mostert and how volatile they might be for a team in constructing it.
Yeah, good framing of that, Joe. I wasn't comfortable with Mostert, even though I only have one running back at the time when I took Christian Watson. Knew I needed another one. Felt Mostert was a little too risky to take there. And there were some running backs who peeled off the board right in front of me, so didn't feel good about taking a running back. Took Watson, who we have seen last year when he played with Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed. It was Watson who commanded the highest target share, and those are high-value targets. He had a 15.6 yard average depth of target, so I do think he has the highest upside of any of the Green Bay receivers. Then I took Mostert because I felt a little more comfortable with it. Yes, there's a lot of risk there, but, Joe, if Mostert is healthy and playing in any given week, I feel pretty confident putting him in my starting lineup. I know I'm not likely not getting.
Right, Pat? I mean, they're so incredibly the fast pace of the offense, the efficiency of it. I know it's a big if to ask him to stay healthy 2 years in a row, but man, it happened last year, so it can't say never.
Yeah, granted, the over-under on number of games he stays healthy for is probably like 12 and a half, but that's okay. If I get 12 starts out of him, I'll happily have him in my starting lineup 12 weeks.
Fair enough. All right, so after Mostert goes Gardner Minshew, Nick Chubb, Brian Thomas, Devin Singletary, then Jonathan Brooks at 10:08. You got me again, D-Bro. That was the guy I was hoping makes it back to me. What, in your opinion, when, in your opinion, should people start to expect fantasy productivity out of Brooks? Because I don't think week 1 is realistic. What week in your mind? Is it week 5? Is it week 7 where Brooks starts to really turn this backfield into his own?
I think probably week 6, week 7, looking at somewhere around the middle of the season. So I'm projecting Brooks to start off being a RB3 type flex play. We're probably going to get some Miles Sanders and Chuba Hubbard working in the early weeks. But then in the back half of the season, and that's why I took Brooks, because, I went so quarterback, wide receiver, like 0 RB. This is the late season hammer. This is the guy. If I'm asking, who could be the guy that's winning me weeks from the flex position and helping me out of the running backs alongside with Joe Mixon, it's Jonathan Brooks, baby.
Makes sense to me. All right, so after Brooks, Chase Brown, Erickson, why Brown over Zach Moss?
Did you listen to the last show? I mean,
well, if I wasn't on it, probably not.
I like Chase. So those that listened, I do like Chase Brown a lot more than Zach Moss. As Pat has alluded to, the guy was a workhorse at Illinois. He got it done. And I just think that what he showed last year, the fact that he earned playing time alongside Joe Mixon, I think that's really telling of his ability. The Bengals were finding ways, hey, we got to get Chase Brown on the field, even though Mixon wasn't injured. Whereas with Zach Moss, I just really haven't seen him in an NFL backfield really rise above and be he's earning touches because he's just as good or a little bit worse than Jonathan Taylor. Last year, the Colts had a lot of injuries in their running back field. I know he missed week 1 with a broken arm, but week 2 comes along and everyone else is decimated. Evan Hall was put on injured reserve after week 1. Deion Jackson was horrible in week 1, so they had to go to somewhere else with Zach Moss. So that's why I prefer Brown. And Brown is just super explosive. Even Zach Moss, I was reading some of the reports of him talking. He's like, yeah, man, this guy's super explosive. And I'm like, that's the guy I want. I don't want the guy who's more of a plotter, who is really more. Fair. That's kind of Zach Moss.
I love that you insisted that I have to spend more time with you, even when I'm not contractually obligated to spend time with you. I've got to listen to all your other shows, to admit, watch your other videos. Go ahead, D.
This is safe space. I would like to admit I did listen to the episode, and the one thing that I took away from Andrew Erickson's Zach Moss point was, and I thought it was fantastic, is he's this year's Alexander Madison. I heard that and I was in the car and I was like, yes! Go Erickson! Oh my God, let's go!
Oh my goodness gracious. All right, let's continue on here. After Chase Brown, George Kittle, Mike Williams, and I took Zach Moss just to spite Andrew Erickson, really, at the end of the day. Like that.
Take him.
I've got it. It's
Have
fine.
fun.
He can be the
Have
plotter.
fun.
As long as he's plotting into the end zone, I really don't care.
fair.
I really don't care.
Plotting to
If
the
Chase
bench.
Brown was so great in the first place, then why are they chasing Zach Moss? No pun intended.
I mean,
Jacoby Myers in a PPR at 1101. That's where I'm going. So there's your alternate opinion there on Zach Moss in the backfield of the Cincinnati Bengals. David Njoku, Jake Ferguson. Back to you, Andrew Erickson. This is a cagey one. Trey Benson at 1104. The rookie selected. Again, when do you see him starting to make an impact potentially for the Arizona Cardinals? And again, I guess it could always be sooner than later because of James Conner's health issues over the years. Although last couple, he's been on the field, Andrew.
I mean, yeah, it's all really comes down to James Conner's health. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to feel confident starting Trey Benson when James Conner is in the lineup, but he's a free agent after this year. So it makes sense to me that they're going to use James Conner for what they can offer or what he can offer them this year. And then Trey Benson, hopefully in the playoff weeks, that's when he gets his chance to shine. And then he's their running back next year.
Next year, we'll see, but this is for 2024, so we'll see how it goes. Gabe Davis at 1105. Debro, all or nothing. Interesting selection here. Now, why not, say, a Keon Coleman or maybe even a Khalil Shakir or somebody like that in Buffalo? Why Gabe Davis, who, again, shows up for a couple games a year? Do you think that changes in Jacksonville for him?
Well, if he shows up for a couple of games, I mean, as my wide receiver 4 on my team, as a flex play, that's all I need him to do. I just need a guy that, from the flex, if I'm going to put him into the lineup, can he win me a week? And Gabe Davis has shown that over multiple seasons. So as a player that I'm not counting him on him being in my starting lineup every single week, but when I do put him in the lineup and the matchup is right, they're up against zone, they're against teams that suck versus deep passing. That's when I'm rolling with Gabe Davis, and I just want week winning upside that I can get from my flex spot.
Fair enough. Okay, continuing on the draft board too. After Gabe Davis, Dallas Goedert goes. Then Brock Bowers, TJ Hawkinson, a little tight end run there. Keon Coleman goes to Spectre. Pat, you took Zeke Elliott at 1110. So interesting reuniting of the Dallas Cowboys and Zeke Elliott. Zach Charbonnet at 11:11, then Dalton Schultz at the turn along with Gus Edwards, 12:02 Khalil Shakir, and then Bryce Young at 12:03. So Pat, let's discuss this here. Zeke and Bryce Young, these two selections. First, let's talk about Zeke and what your expectations are for him being reunited with the Cowboys.
I think he's going to play a lot this year, Joe. And I sort of felt like I positioned myself in this draft laying off running back a little bit, where I had to go for playability over upside at that point. And I'd be pretty surprised if Rico Dowdle played ahead of Ezekiel Elliott this year. Can't totally rule it out, but I think Zeke is going to play a lot. And granted, we're not going to get vintage Zeke this year. I think we know that ship has pretty much sailed. But I was encouraged by how much they used him in the passing game in New England last year. So I'm hoping that his contributions as a pass catcher can sort of offset what we know he's probably lost as a runner, and he'll still be a playable running back most weeks.
There you go, playable running back. And then the other selection here of Bryce Young, obviously a down rookie year. Okay, it was not a positive experience for him. What have you seen in this offseason? I know Andrew Erickson is very bullish when it comes to the Panthers. What do you see in terms of the potential for things to improve for Bryce Young in year 2?
I see him working with the QB whisperer, Dave Canales, who milked a really good season out of Baker Mayfield last year. And I see the Panthers at least trying to upgrade the supporting cast around Bryce Young, which was completely wretched last year. So that was
Geno
a big part
Smith
of it.
The year before, right, Pat? I mean, we're talking about a pretty good run here for Canales.
Yes, sir. I think he can coax, a decent season out of him. And maybe Bryce Young shouldn't have been the 101 and like doesn't have the same sort of ceiling that we've already seen from CJ Stroud. But I think Bryce Young can at least be an average NFL starter if he's got a better supporting cast around him and, better coaching.
Jaleel McLaughlin goes next at 12:04. That's Debro's guy. Romeo Dobbs at 12:05. Blake Corum at 12:06. Frustrating again out of my queue. Josh Downs at 12:07. Debro, Jerome Ford at 12:08. Talk to me.
We still have no clue if we're going to see Nick Chubb this season. And if
true.
we see him, what version of Nick Chubb we're going to see. I keep hammering Jerome Ford in best ball drafts, these early drafts, all over the board. Because the fact of it is like when he was the starter in Cleveland, he was the RB20 in fantasy points per game. If Chubb doesn't play, or if he's not good, Jerome Ford is going to have a role in this backfield. He could be their starter this year. And if that's the case, he's an RB2. We're getting at what? RB4 prices?
Hard to argue with that. I think that's a very cagey pick, too, if you are looking for running backs late. I mean, at least in the beginning of the year, you have to imagine Jerome Ford gets a fair amount of run, right? Because there's always time then after that for other running back injuries, other running back opportunities off the waiver wire. People have to drop players off their roster. So Jerome Ford as a draft piece, probably more intriguing than people realize late in drafts. I think that's something people should really pay attention to. Daniel Jones goes next. Erickson, how do you feel about this stack of the Daniel Jones Malik neighbors? I mean, this has got to at least be good for, 9-10 points a game, right?
It's more than that. Daniel Jones is a mobile
I
quarterback.
meant for the Giants.
Hey, that's better than last year. That has to be an improvement. I think they averaged like 10 points per game last year. Now that may
That's
not be
why I said 9-10. I know what I'm talking about.
I just think Daniel Jones, just go back one more year. And he was a fringe fantasy QB1 because he runs. Do you think he's not going to be running for his life to try to save his job and his career in New York? I think he is. So he may not be there during the playoffs because he has an injury clause in his contract. So if they're out of the playoff race, he's not going to be on the field at the end of the year. But I'll worry about that now, especially I'll worry about that later now that I have him as my QB3.
We better just be careful he doesn't run into Jalen Carter, because I think that's going to be a problem if he does. Marshawn Lloyd at 12-10, Antonio Gibson at 12-11. Then I took your guy, Andrew Erickson, because I did listen to you. I'm teasing. I do listen to you when you talk. Kendrick Miller at 12-12, the Spicy Takes episode. Very fun. If you want to have a little fun this afternoon on your lunch break, or you're walking the dog, you're at the gym, or whatever you're doing, go check out that episode. Super fun stuff. And then I selected Justin Fields at 13-01 as my third quarterback because I've got time. I got my two old boring guys, so I'm going to swing for the fences with Justin Fields because I look at the Steelers' schedule. I don't see a whole lot of wins there for Russell Wilson early on. I think at some point that 1 year Russell Wilson experiment is going to turn into the let's see what we have for Justin Fields just in the nick of time for bye weeks. I'm very excited about the fact that he was still on the board for me, so I took him. Curtis Samuel goes next at 13-02. Derek Carr at 13-03. Roshan Johnson at 13-04. Andrew Erickson, let's discuss the selection here of Roshan.
I mean, I just think that he has the pathway to be the goal line back for the Bears because DeAndre Swift is not that guy. He's not been that guy for several different NFL teams and coachings and offenses. So I think the Bears believe in Roshan Johnson. They talked about him ad nauseum last year, how much they love this guy. He's great in pass pro. They can have him out on passing downs. So I think he's going to have a role in this offense. Again, DeAndre Swift, I don't know how many times you need to continue to be disappointed with DeAndre Swift from a fantasy perspective as he goes from team to team as teams get rid of him. So Roshan Johnson, to me, look, the coaching staff loved Kyron Williams his rookie year, but then he got hurt. Roshan Johnson, the coaching staff loved Roshan Johnson his rookie year, but he had a concussion. He missed a lot of games. So I think that limited his development full off season. I think they're going to trade Khalil Herbert. So it's going to be a two-man backfield. I think Roshan's going to be the goal line back.
Then Debro, you took Jermaine Burton, who we've been talking about a lot so far this year in 2024, 13-05. Is there enough available though for him unless Higgins isn't there in some capacity, whether it be injury or trade?
It's been plenty of volume for Tyler Boyd. Jermaine Burton's better than him. I'm going to take the upside shot at the end of every single draft on Burton.
13-06, Brandon Cooks, really good value there. Ty Chandler, 13-07, then Jerry Jeudy, Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard to Pat, Audric Estime of Denver at 13-11, then Khalil Herbert at the turn with Cole Kmet, so two Bears go. Dontavian Wicks at 14-02. Pat, you took Chuba and then Pat Freiermuth, so let's discuss those two selections and your feelings about them.
I want a do-over on the Chuba Hubbard pick. I just felt the pressure. The clock was ticking down on me. Had I thought about that a little more, I would have taken either Ray Davis or Kamani Vidal there. Guys who I think have higher upside. Probably the only way I'm not dissatisfied with that Chuba Hubbard pick is if Jonathan Brooks is delayed with his recovery and maybe opens the season on PUP. So yeah, I kind of hate that pick and want it back. And then in the 14th round, I wasn't pleased with any of the other options there. I know it's a mock draft, but presumably, we're playing it out like it's real and you can trade. So I like Pat Freiermuth. I mean, I think things are sort of pointed up for him. There were a lot of tight end targets in Atlanta last year. Arthur Smith, for as much as he's maligned by the fantasy community, he is a former tight ends coach. And there's like not a lot of firepower at wide receiver in Pittsburgh right now. So I do think things are pointing toward a pretty good season for Pat Freiermuth. And I think there's value getting him here in the draft, even though he's a second tight end for me.
Is there more value for Freiermuth if Fields or Wilson's quarterback?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, because I'm looking at last year and Cole Kmet's kind of emergence, and I know maybe that's circumstantial because of, the limitation of the other weapons outside DJ Moore that Fields had to work with last year. But Russell Wilson wasn't exactly a guy that was constantly making tight end superstars in Seattle or in Denver.
No, but they did have a little more at wide receiver in Seattle with Russell Wilson than they had in Chicago for most of Fields' tenure there. So it's kind of hard to tell, I think.
Okay. Rashid Shaheed goes in this last round at 14:04, then 14:05, Luke Musgrave, Jahan Dotson, Hunter Henry, Debo takes Ricky Pearsall. So Debo, this is insurance, right? This is for the inevitable Debo Samuel trade. Is that what happens?
Yeah, I mean, with these final round picks in your drafts, you need to be shooting for ultimate absolute upside. If an injury, if a trade, if anything breaks your way, are you going to strike gold? And if Debo moves on, then Ricky Pearsall is shooting up draft boards. This is the type of pick because all of these guys, how many of these picks in the final rounds of your drafts are even going to be on fantasy rosters come week 4, week 5? So I'm just going to shoot for the upside because the likelihood is most of those final round picks you're going to be dropping to the waiver wire anyway.
You selected Andrew Erickson, Russell Wilson. Looking at the schedule, I want you to be honest with me. They go at the Falcons, at the Broncos. They're at home against the Chargers. Then you've got the Colts wrapping up September in Indianapolis for them before they play the Cowboys. So Andrew Erickson, what is your expectation here in these games? Do you think Russell Wilson can go through that schedule and by October still be the starter?
Yeah, I do. I think that the schedule is way easier for the Steelers in the beginning of the season than the second half. That's when they have to play every single AFC North team. Like, that's where Russell Wilson's going to get benched, in my opinion. Like, or he's going to get hurt. Like, they call it the black and blue division for a reason. Like, I don't know if Russ is going to be able to survive. And if I'm Mike Tomlin, what's the perfect time for me to then throw in a mobile quarterback against all these AFC North teams in these divisional matchups? Is during that second half of the year where Justin Fields is fresh. All these teams are beat up in December. Like, that's the strategy. If I'm the Steelers, I want Russ to make it the first half of the year and then make the swap to Justin Fields when these teams are all beaten and battered. So I think Russ is going to be the guy to start the year. And again, if they trade for Debo Samuel, okay, that's another weapon. Boom. And I can feel good about starting him and then moving on from, like, I did want Fields, but you took him before me. So I will say that because I'd rather have it at the end of the season and that rushing production.
Sure. Well, and I think that's very important to point out for the audience too, right? You're thinking about, okay, if you have two quarterbacks already, what's that third quarterback? The third quarterback's got to be the upside play, the guy that you see, this is where you couldn't take, even a Drake May in a deeper league or something like that, where you're like, okay, who's the guy that's going to, help here? Justin Fields could be that guy that really changes things significantly if he takes to whatever Arthur Smith cooks up, which I don't know if anyone can take to that, but we'll see what happens. Tyler Algier, Kate Otten, and I took Adam Thielen, a guy who had 100 catches last year with the last pick of this draft and 137 targets. I don't know. It's funny. I did not believe in Adam Thielen last year, but if he's going to be there in the last pick, upside be damned. I'm going to take another old fart here. The draft wizard didn't.
Olds drafting olds.
That's whatever, dude. I'm going to be on the cover. I'm going to be on the cover of AARP magazine holding a title from this league. That's what I'm going to be. The draft wizard hates me. It loves Andrew Erickson, though. Andrew, you are the number one. You are the winner. What does it feel like to win a draft, man?
Feels good. And to be honest, I felt like I left some meat on the bone here. I feel like I could have drafted better.
Look at you. Never satiated, never happy, always trying to improve. God, you're such an inspiration.
I try.
Speaking of satiated, where did the OnlyFans land, Joey?
OnlyFans just under me. Also another show on my OnlyFans account. I was at 10. OnlyFans was at 11. Debro, you were middle of the pack with Pat. Pat ahead of you, of course, because he's smarter than you at 5. And then Debro at 6. Let's run through all of the other pieces here and see who liked your draft, who didn't. Erickson, since you won, let's talk about the expert opinions for your draft, because you hated mine. You gave me a D. You gave me a thumbs down on CD Lamb. What's wrong with you?
That's revenge for the last mock draft we did when you gave me an F.
How do you
so
what's
there
the
you go.
thumbs down on CD Lamb? Like, how dare you? How dare you, sir?
I don't
that's
have.
what I say.
I mean, CeeDee Lamb's not my wide receiver 1, so that's probably why. Because Chase is. So that's the only reason.
Ugh, gross. Take me through the expert opinions, and then we'll run through your roster. Before I lose my lunch
Andrew
here.
Erickson liked my draft more than anybody else. Shout out to me. But another member of our crew here today, Pappas Morris. 97 out of 100. Thanks, Fitz. Appreciate that, man.
Look at that.
Others, Dalton Teldon gave me 96, Derek Tate 93, and Matt Harmon from Yahoo gave me a 93. So excited about that. And it's, he likes the receivers I drafted: Mari Cooper, Malik Neighbors. So he's a receiver guru. So I'm doing the right thing, I think.
Look, I gotta say, I'm still not sold on the Chase Brown thing, but the rest of this roster is really interesting. Lamar at the first quarterback spot, then Jahmyr Gibbs, Chase Brown, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, Cooper. Look, you got 3 legitimate studs at wide receiver. That's why Harmon likes this draft. Evan Ingram at tight end, really good selection there. And look, Neighbors is your flex. It's great. I'm still like the Deshaun Watson thing. I'm in the you got to prove it to me stage now. Like, I've had it. Like, I understand last year going, okay, we'll give it another chance. I'm done with it. But you did back it up with Daniel Jones. So, and you do have Russell Wilson too. You have a lot of quarterbacks. So when somebody gets hurt, somebody in this league is calling Andrew Erickson up for a trade. George Pickens, Trey Benson, Roshan Johnson. It's a really good roster. Let's go to Pat's roster. Kyler Murray, Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert. Those are the RBs. Then Tyreek Hill, Devonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, Sam Laporta, Hollywood Brown. Super flex spot, Trevor Lawrence and Bryce Young. So you've got 3 quarterbacks to work with: Christian Watson, Zeke, Pat Frymuth, and Chuba Hubbard. Pat, what's the strength of this team in your opinion, and what's the deficit when you're looking back at it?
Pass catchers are the strength. Running back is that's the deficit. Like, I'm going to have to manage the running back situation carefully all year. And by the way, Joe, I heap praise on Andrew Erickson's draft, and he turns around and completely pans my draft.
What a jerk.
As one of the experts
So
who
Erickson
most dislikes it. Although Erickson only disliked my draft slightly more than Derek Brown disliked my draft, who's also one of the guys who panned my draft.
I apologize for nothing, Pat.
Did Andrew give you a thumbs down on Tyreek Hill? Like, is that what he did? Like,
They both hated the Hollywood Brown pick, and Erickson also disliked Devontae Smith and Christian Watson.
I like Watson, Pat. I'm with you. I think there's explosiveness here. But so I guess here's the question, Pat. You know, when you are leaving drafts in 2024, especially Superflex, you want to make sure you have the quarterback play, which you absolutely do. You got Lawrence, you got Murray, so you're in a good shape there. You want to have your wide receivers. You got Tyreek Hill as a stud. We all know what Smith's capable of. And look, we could debate Hollywood Brown all we want. He's playing for the Chiefs. The Chiefs have a great head coach, a great quarterback, offensive line, continuity. He's a new piece in there. You know, I don't want to say it's too big to fail, because we saw a lot of people fail last year, but I think Brown's better than Kadarius Toney at the end of the day. But Pat, isn't this how you'd rather go into the season, right? Where you're having those things set up, because running back is the one thing that constantly seems to reveal itself year over year with other options off the wire.
Yes, we see good running backs come out of the fog every year. And I feel like giving yourself a chance to get lucky at running back is better than giving yourself a chance to get lucky at wide receiver, because we don't see, maybe last year was sort of a rarity with Puka Nacua and Tank Dell having such big impacts as rookies. But most of the time, you do not see guys come out of the ether like that at wide receiver. But at running back, guys get hurt, and all of a sudden someone that no one was drafting in August is a guy people are spending $50 or $60 of their fab money for in week 1 or week 2. Like, it happens that way every year. So I would rather short myself at running back than at the other positions.
Speaking of coming out of the ether or off of it, Derek Brown, Jaden Daniels, Joe Mixon, Brian Robinson, Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, DK Metcalf, Debra, I got to say, I think you should have scored higher here for that wide receiver core. It is really good. Chase, Collins, DK Metcalf, Dalton Kincaid at tight end. Your flex spot is Brooks, and then you got Caleb Williams. So I think you got dinged here because of the youth at quarterback. You have Will Levis there too. I don't love Gabe Davis. I think the Pearsall pick is smart. I think the Ford pick is very smart. So is Burton. Do you feel like maybe you've been doing one too many dynasty drafts here? Do you think this is too much looking ahead and not enough looking right in front of you?
No. I think that rookies are still one of the last edges of drafts, and drafting them in the later rounds. Because how many times do we see this, guys? Every single year we talk about rookies and we're like, oh, they have untapped upside and potential. And those are the guys that carry you to fantasy titles down the stretch. The Amon-Ra St. Browns, the Rashee Rices of last year. Those are the guys that carry you down the back half of seasons. And so, no, I love this team. And now, I will say the only thing that I would like to have back on this, and this is why I love using the mock draft simulator, the pick analysis here says if I would have gone James Cook and George Kittle, and I didn't think George Kittle would still be on the board in the freaking 10th round, but it's like if I would have gone James Cook, George Kittle versus Dalton Kincaid and Jonathan Brooks, it would have given me another 88 points to my draft, and I'd have been vaulted all the way up on the heels of Andrew Erickson. I would have been in second.
Yeah, the draft insights were telling me that I should have drafted Jahmyr Gibbs at 3-1, but there was no... See, this is the thing. There's no way I'm passing on the quarterbacks that are up there at the time. I'm taking Goff, I'm taking Cousins, because after that, it gets real tough to look outside of that. Looking at my draft, Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins are my two QBs with Justin Fields on the bench, lying in wait. Rashad White and Zach Moss, the running backs. But then I got CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Terry McLaurin, Travis Kelce, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Xavier Worthy, Jacoby Myers, Adam Thielen, and Kendre Miller. Pat, you're the smartest guy in this room. What do you make of this roster?
Oh, I mean, like, I thought it was actually pretty solid. I personally would not have opened up with Lamb. But, you bounce back.
What would you have opened up with?
I would have opened up with Patrick Mahomes.
See, that was the only debate. And I wanted to see, and this is, again, why we're doing mock drafts here. I wanted to see what it looks like. So basically what it looks like is you either go ahead and you take CeeDee Lamb and then you end up with the Goff/Cousins realm of QBs, which I think is more than serviceable this year. Like, I don't want to downplay them as though somehow they're lesser, especially when both those guys have potential to finish as QB1s. Or you end up going with Mahomes, and then you're taking Jahmyr Gibbs or Marvin Harrison Jr. Is that the start you prefer? So you would rather have Mahomes, Harrison, and let's say Jahmyr Gibbs? Pat?
Well, I do think the run out of the draft sort of vindicates you in a way, Joe, because if you wanted to get a real firm foothold at wide receiver, the top 8 wide receivers ran out just before you picked in the second round at the end. Garrett Wilson went right in front of you. So the next best options were Marvin Harrison Jr. and Devontae Adams. A little bit iffy at the 2-3 turn in a Superflex draft. So I think you were vindicated. And meanwhile, there were two pretty good, and maybe their upsides are a little bit limited because they don't run. But those guys are really solid. Like, if they stay healthy, I think those guys are going to be like solid low-end QB1s, high-end QB2s. So, and otherwise you built a roster sort of the way I want to, focusing heavily on the pass catchers and, letting things maybe work themselves out at running back a little bit more. Paying some lip service to... No, that's okay. Just, it's not like you ignored the running back position, but...
It got away from me a little bit. I'll keep it real. It got away from me a little bit, but again, if I'm going to let something get away from me like you, it's going to be the running back position. I'll find it later. Juggernaut, shout out to them at 1487 score. Second place, only to... Perfect, Andrew Erickson. At 1,500, that's perfect, right, Andrew? Is this the perfect draft?
Is this the perfect draft? That's the show we're doing? So I can just copy this instead of writing the article?
Here we go. Oh, there you go. What have you done, Joe? What have you
hear
done?
From everybody else. So drop your comments in the chat. Of these 4 goons here, which one do you think had the best draft here? Who do you like? You like my draft? You like D-Bros, Erickson's? You agree that he's perfect in every way, just like his soon-to-be wife in a couple weeks here is going to assume? Pat Fitzmaurice, whose draft do you like the least? Whose do you like the most? Drop your comments below. Subscribe to FantasyPros YouTube channel. Don't forget also download the DraftKings app. Use that promo code FantasyPros. And of course, run the mock drafts yourself. Go to fantasypros.com/draftwizard. Download the Draft Wizard app. You can run a million simulations. You can go right now and draft with live humans. You can draft with the robots. Use the pick predictor. Use the cheat sheets. Use all the features there. And the more you do at Fantasy Pros, the higher up your memberships are, the more bells and whistles you get to attach all that draft software to your drafts, where you are going to crush life and crush every single draft with us. We're here for the ride with you. We are right there riding shotgun, ready to make sure you bring home the gold. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Pat and Derrickson, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.